Okay, guys, in this one I want to talk about the sheet tasks that you're going to be working through this year. You've touched on it last year where we were talking about Science of Human Endeavour and the CC tiles, so the communication, collaboration, development, influence, application, limitation. So I'll bung that down here so I can refer to it a little bit later. Alright, so there's your bits and pieces that we can talk about, the key concepts. And I want to go through some of the things that the assessment feedback from moderation says about the ones that were good and the ones that weren't quite so good. So the good ones, to start with, they were to do with contemporary topics. So it's something that's happened in the last decade or so, not something that happened, 4 or 5 decades ago when I was born. So you wouldn't be talking about the moon landing, but you might be talking about new developments to colonise Mars, for instance, and the radiation or something or other that you might experience on the way there. You might be talking about something that's happening at CERN or Atlas or some other sort of particle accelerator, those types of places. You might be talking about how wind drag in Formula One racing or V8 supercars or Tour de France or something like that has influenced the changes in technology, changes in design, changes in rules. So what you're looking for is something that's definitely sort of recent. One of the reasons it's so much better than something that's not contemporary is you're actually able to unpack it as a something that's happening now rather than telling the story of something that happened a while ago. So here it turns into something that's more like a recount. So a recount in research project is you telling the story of what happened, not necessarily explaining why things are happening or why they're good or bad. All right, so recounts tend to end up somewhere in the C bands. We're gonna, extend it so that we can end up somewhere, possibly in the A bands for this sort of stuff, and we're going to be pushed more towards the C bands for this sort of stuff at best. The other things that they are that they have in them is identified one of these key ideas and unpacking a little bit. I'm not talking about saying, this new technology get us to Mars, whatever it is evidence of development of technology, because, okay, you're just throwing that word in there, and I saw a few last year that just had that word sort of highlighted or in bold or underlined or italics or something like that, and I just kind of threw it in the middle of a sentence or a paragraph and kind of paid lip service at best to that being the link to some sort of, Science of Human Endeavour. What you really need to do is, I'll show you the Word document that we're going to be using, but underneath each of these things here is 4 or 5 dot points, and these 4 or 5 dot points actually unpack, what these key concepts, I guess, really apply to, or what they can be used to understand or explain in terms of Science of the Human Endeavour. So it allows you to go into a little bit more depth. So it might be this is a brand new technology that's helped scientists in such and such a place gather data more effectively and more accurately in shorter period of time. This is evidence of development. Rather than just saying this is evidence of development, you can kind of say why it's evidence of development. The other thing that they do really well is link the Science of the Human Endeavour to the content that they're actually covering. So go back to the development one, new technology, new resources, new blah, 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 is evidence of development. Really quick example, the Higgs boson was sort of theorised by Higgs back in the, I think it was 60s or 70s or something or other, and it wasn't until a handful of years ago that we actually had the technology to detect them, and now we're kind of okay, reasonably good at detecting them. So the technology had to develop in order to solve this problem that he theorised, or find evidence of this thing that he theorised all those decades ago. So it's actually linking the content of what you're talking about back to the key points of these things here. All right, so you're not just talking about the key points of CC dial, you're talking about how the content, the physics content, the scientific content in your sheet task is actually linking to the key points in here. What that means is that you're able to better explain that you understand what each of these key concepts is, but you're also able to draw links to them up here. So think of it like the substantiation synthesis in the research project. So substantiating it might be this, the synthesis is linking those key concepts to it. The Poorer, lower quality ones, I guess you could say, were basically ended up being recounts of physics or scientific investigations that happened many, many years ago. They also included very little physics, so they spent a lot of time talking about the SHE, the science of human endeavour part, but not actually linking it to any sort of real world physics or understanding of what's going on. And unfortunately, lots of them were still kind of more like an issues investigation that used to be part of the course, but it's definitely not anymore. So people were talking about the positive impact of the sciencey thing and the negative impact of the sciencey thing, and then coming to a conclusion at the end. So people were still kind of tied up in that old issues investigation that used to be part of the course, but it isn't anymore. So what you guys are going to be doing is, hopefully you've already chosen a topic, you should have by now. If not, finding something that's contemporary, so in the last, since the year 2000, make it since you were born. That's probably easy enough. Link the science of human endeavour to the content that you're actually going to talk about. So you're linking these things here to the physics of it, and identifying and unpacking these, so the dot points underneath. All right, I'll edit those in here somewhere, somehow. I'll probably edit in a screenshot from the Chief Assessor's report or the assessment advice, whatever it's called, that thing as well. Hopefully so that my voice is still over the top of it so you can still hear what I'm talking about. But other than that, we're looking at, I think it's 1,500 words long. You probably want to spend a good 40%, I guess, on the science of human endeavour stuff, a good 40% on the physics, and 20%, I guess, the intro, outro, sort of identifying why it's a good idea or not. The good ones that I saw last year, so from a couple of my students that came back as A+, were they picked something that was really recent. So one of them was on LIGO, so the Laser Interferometry Gravitational Observatory thingo, detecting of gravitational waves, and they linked it to physics that was in our course. So not just linking SHE to content, but it's content from our course. So gravitational waves are waves, interference, blah, blah, blah. That's part of our course, so you can talk about it. But that student also had a bunch of ideas about why, other sorts of things that he could talk about, and then sort of decide, gave evidence about why he wasn't talking about those. So it made it really solid in his head, what he was choosing, why he was choosing it, and how he's going to link this to the science of it. All right.